For nearly 10 years, Clara had lived a life that felt like a loop, one day folding into the next without change. Every morning followed the same rhythm. Her alarm buzzed at 6 a.m. sharp, cutting through the stillness of dawn. She would head to the kitchen, where the smell of hot coffee brought her a moment of comfort. Meanwhile, her husband, Marcus, was already up, dressed in his suit, rushing around with one hand on his phone and the other adjusting his tie. He barely looked at her, eyes fixed on the screen. "Have you seen my wallet?" he would ask, distracted. "It's on the table, by the fruit bowl," Clara replied, her voice soft. Then, the doorbell echoed through the house, a sound that had come to symbolize his daily departure. "Bye," he'd say, already halfway out. Clara stood alone in the quiet kitchen, the silence pressing in. Marcus was a good man, responsible, kind in his own way. He never raised his voice, never broke a promise. Yet, Clara felt something missing. There was a distance between them she couldn't cross. Their conversations had turned into short updates. "What's for dinner? When is the car due for service? Have you paid the bill?" All the important things, how she felt, what she needed, remained unspoken. Sometimes she wondered if this was just what marriage became. Maybe everyone feels like this after a while, she told herself. But still, the loneliness clung to her. Marcus had his work. She had the house. And in between them, a quiet gap kept growing. Then there was Bruno, their dog. Or rather, his dog. Marcus had brought Bruno home as a puppy, claiming he'd be good for security. "He'll keep us safe," Marcus had said, ruffling the small boxer's head. Clara had nodded politely, unsure how she felt about having a dog in the house. At first, Clara treated Bruno like any other chore, feeding, cleaning, opening the back door when he wanted to go out. She rarely looked him in the eye. He wasn't aggressive or loud. In fact, Bruno was unusually calm for a boxer. Most days he'd lie in the garden, belly to the warm earth, eyes half closed, chasing dreams only he could see. Bruno saved his energy for Marcus. When the front door creaked open in the evening, he'd spring to life, tail wagging hard enough to knock over furniture. Clara would smile weakly from the kitchen doorway as Marcus crouched down, laughing while Bruno covered his face in licks. It was a scene Clara saw every evening. But for her, Bruno offered no such excitement. He barely glanced her way. One morning, the house felt colder than usual. Marcus had already left and Clara sat alone, hands wrapped around a mug of lukewarm coffee. The silence was thick. Outside, wind rustled the leaves, whispering in ways her husband never did. Then she noticed Bruno. He stood quietly at the kitchen door, just watching her. There was something in his gaze, not the usual passiveness she expected. His eyes were still and steady, filled with something unspoken. Clara shifted in her chair, uncertain. "What?" she said aloud, forcing a chuckle. "You're just a dog, Bruno." But he didn't move. He just kept staring, as if he could see the ache she was trying to hide. Slowly, Bruno walked over and rested his head against her leg. Clara froze. The warmth of his fur against her skin felt like an unexpected hug. Her hand, almost on its own, reached down and brushed his head. A sigh escaped her lips, so soft. She hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath all morning. For the first time, she looked at him not as Marcus's dog, but as something more. From that day on, Clara began to notice the little things, subtle moments that had always been there, hiding in plain sight. Whenever she sank into the armchair after a long, empty day, Bruno would quietly settle a few feet away, his body calm, his eyes half closed, but always watching. He never barked for attention. He never asked for anything. He was simply there, silent, steady, and strangely comforting. On nights, when tears welled in Clara's eyes without warning, Bruno seemed to know. He would appear outside her bedroom door, lie down quietly and stay until morning. His presence didn't erase the pain, but it made it easier to carry. "You feel it too, don't you?" she whispered one evening, crouched beside him. He licked her hand, slow and gentle, and she believed, just for a moment, that maybe he did. The contrast between Bruno and Marcus grew harder to ignore. Marcus would come home late, muttering "long day," before collapsing onto the couch, his eyes glued to his phone or the news. Clara would serve dinner. He'd nod his thanks, but never ask about her day. Not really. She longed to tell him how lonely she felt. But when she tried, the words jammed in her throat. "I'm tired too, you know," she finally said one night, voice trembling. Marcus didn't look up. "You've been home all day, Clara. What are you tired from?" The words struck her harder than she expected. She nodded, lips pressed tight, and walked away. In the living room, Bruno lifted his head, ears perked. As Clara sat beside him, he leaned in, his quiet company more comforting than anything her husband had offered in weeks. That night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Clara felt it fully, the ache of being unseen. She wasn't angry, not yet, but the emptiness Marcus left behind was becoming impossible to ignore. Beside her, the sheets were still warm from his body, but his presence felt far away. On the floor, Bruno slept curled in a tight ball, and somehow it was his presence that soothed her into sleep. The next morning felt different. There was a soft stillness in the air, the kind that came before a quiet shift. Clara stood by the window, watching sunlight pour over the backyard, painting golden lines across the grass. Bruno trotted out, tail swaying gently, nose pressed to the ground. Clara opened the door and stepped out barefoot, something she hadn't done in years. "Come on," she called, her voice soft. Bruno looked up and padded over. Clara clipped the leash onto his collar and stepped outside the gate for the first time in weeks. The nearby park sat only a few blocks away, but the walk felt like a new beginning. Bruno sniffed every tree, every post, every patch of grass with an eager joy that made her smile. "You're really something," she murmured as he looked up at her, tongue out, eyes shining. It was the first time she'd smiled that wide in months. As they strolled, Clara found herself talking. At first it felt silly. "Guess what I made for dinner yesterday?" she asked. Bruno didn't respond, of course, but his ears flicked as if listening. So she kept going. She talked about her dreams from the night before, her favorite book as a child, even her fears. "I don't know who I am anymore," she confessed one afternoon, standing under a jacaranda tree. Bruno simply stood beside her, close enough to touch. The walks became a ritual. Twice a day, morning and late afternoon, Clara and Bruno would walk the same path, and each time it felt like a thread mending something within her. Marcus noticed the change. "You're really into those walks lately," he said one evening as she untied her shoes. "They help," she replied. He shrugged, already half-turned toward the television. "As long as you're happy, I guess." Away, she was walking toward something. The days that followed unfolded quietly, but something had changed. Clara smiled more often, even if just to herself. She started reading again, letting novels and poems pull her out of her head. Some mornings, she danced in the kitchen while the kettle boiled, soft, swaying movements Bruno watched with gentle curiosity. "You think I'm silly, don't you?" she whispered one morning. Bruno blinked, tail giving a lazy wag. It was enough. Marcus noticed, even if he didn't say it directly. "You've been different lately," he said one evening while putting away his briefcase. Clara looked at him calmly. "I've been paying attention to what I need." He raised an eyebrow. "And where do I fit in that?" She paused. "I don't know yet, Marcus. That's the truth." He didn't respond right away, only nodded slowly and walked away. It wasn't anger she saw in his eyes. It was fear. One Saturday morning, Clara sat at the park bench with Bruno curled at her feet. A woman walking a golden retriever paused nearby. "That's a beautiful dog," she said, smiling. Clara looked down and smiled too. "He's more than that. He saved me." The woman tilted her head. "How so?" Clara hesitated, then spoke softly. He listened, when no one else did. The woman nodded as if she understood, then moved along. Clara watched her go, the weight of her own words settling in like sunlight, gentle but strong. That evening, Clara placed her notebook on the dinner table and sat across from Marcus. "I need us to talk," she said quietly. He looked up from his plate. "Now." "Yes," she said. "We keep avoiding this and it's breaking me." He nodded slowly. "All right, talk to me." So she did. She told him about the loneliness, the silence, the way she had felt erased in her own life. She didn't yell. She didn't accuse. She just spoke her truth, and Marcus, for the first time, didn't interrupt. When she finished, Marcus sat back in his chair, stunned. "I didn't know," he said, his voice rough. "I tried to tell you," Clara said, "but after a while I gave up." He looked down at his hands. "Do you still love me?" Clara's eyes softened, but her voice was steady. "I don't know, Marcus, but I still believe in something real. I just don't know if it's still here between us." Outside the window, Bruno lay in the garden, watching the sunset, calm, patient, and steady as ever. In the days that followed their conversation, the house felt quieter than ever, not with tension, but with reflection. Clara continued her walks with Bruno, but now when she returned, Marcus would sometimes be in the living room waiting. He didn't say much, but his eyes followed her more closely. One evening, as she walked in through the door, he simply said, "How was the park?" Clara blinked, caught off guard. "Peaceful," she said. "I needed it." He nodded slowly. "I'm glad." Still, something within Clara had shifted permanently. She no longer walked on eggshells or waited for Marcus to notice her. She moved with intention. She smiled at small things. She wrote pages in her notebook without apology. Bruno remained her silent witness through it all. On the days she still cried, he would find her and rest his head on her lap. "You never expect anything from me," she'd whisper. "You just stay." And that, more than anything, had healed her. One Sunday morning, Marcus joined them for a walk. He didn't say much, but his pace matched Clara's, and Bruno didn't seem to mind. It wasn't a perfect moment, it was awkward and quiet, but Clara appreciated the effort. Afterward, Marcus turned to her as they reached the front door. "I want to learn how to do better," he said, "but I don't know where to start." Clara looked at him, her voice soft. "Start by listening, really listening, not just with your ears, but with your heart." He nodded, slowly, as if finally understanding that change wouldn't come in a day. That night, Clara didn't cry. She lay in bed with a sense of quiet contentment. Marcus was beside her, still learning, still unsure, but no longer ignoring the space between them. Bruno lay near the door, peaceful and steady. Clara knew things weren't fixed, not yet, but the silence no longer felt empty. It felt open, like a pause between notes in a song. She was finally learning how to sing again. In time, Clara didn't measure her joy by Marcus's words or actions. She had found it in the rustle of leaves under her feet, in the softness of Bruno's fur, in the pages she filled with honesty. Marcus tried and sometimes failed, but Clara no longer waited to be seen. She saw herself, and in that seeing, she found something no one could take away, a quiet, resilient love for her own soul. And beside her, always, Bruno walked on, her companion, her comfort, and the silent hero who helped her find her way back home.